Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by two of my very cool and interesting co-hosts.
Nate Heininger.
Shane Kelly.
And this week we are talking about Creature in the Well. Creature in the Well is a pinball-inspired hack and slash, or maybe hack and slash inspired pinball game from a developer called Flight School. And I'm very excited to talk about this one because, as listeners to this show who've been around for a while will know, I get really, really excited when pinball mechanics make their way into other types of video games. And there's a few of those that we can talk about from the history of this show.
As someone who's known you all your life, Raygan, I mean, one thing I'd like to just say about you is ever since you were a young man, you've played the silver ball.
From Soho down to Dryden, I must have played them all.
Dryden?
Isn't that the lyric?
Brighton. British.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I just misremembered that, but yeah, okay.
Well, I had no idea what you were saying, so I was on board with it.
All right, yeah, I mean, I apparently have no idea what the Who are saying, so there we go.
All I'm saying is that Raygan is a pinball wizard.
Mm-hmm. Regular old Fonzarelli.
Such a supple wrist.
I will definitely counter that by saying I'm actually not that good at actual pinball, but I do find that like pinball video games are like a niche that I've found myself really liking. So I love video pinball of all kinds, and honestly, the more unlike actual pinball tables and the more like a video game with pinball mechanics, the better. So, a couple that we've covered on this show that I really, really, really liked. I was a huge fan of Yoku's Island Express. We covered it a while back, and it's a pinball Metroidvania. Which, if you don't know how those two things could possibly fit together, go back and listen to that episode or go play that game. It rules. And way back even before that, I talked, and this was one of those weird situations where I played a game and couldn't get anybody else on the show to play it, so we ended up talking about it as part of sort of a grab bag. But at some point on this show, I talked pretty extensively about Rollers of the Realm, which is a pinball-based RPG that also totally rules. So, pinball making its way into video games is like something I'm super passionate about. It doesn't happen enough. And when it does, I'm like all over it. And so when I saw that this game was coming out, I was very excited. Well, I guess before we dig in too far, somebody describe it who's not just going to say like, hey, I love this stuff.
So this game combines an action RPG in which you play as a little robot with a iron pipe with I would say maybe pinball mechanics is the wrong word here for me. To me, it really feels more like breakout mechanics with a dash of pinball mechanics. And when I say that Raygan has played the silver ball since he was a young man, I mean, I almost brought me back to when we were really young and we found one of those Atari mini consoles that was just a dedicated console just for breakout. Mm-hmm. And you and I played a shit ton of that. Until we found, better video games like the Sega Genesis. But what really, I think, typifies the kind of game this is it's mainly a Zelda-style action RPG, by which I mean you're traveling from room to room in a large dungeon, and most of those rooms will have either an explicit or a secret goal. And you are completing each room. The strange thing about it is, unlike most action RPGs, there's not really enemies out there in the world for you.
Yeah, just one very large enemy.
Exactly. There's the creature in the well. There's
the titular enemy. Yes.
And they do a lot with the creature. Mechanically, what does the creature do? Not much. The creature has hands that will, like, if you die, throw you out of the well, and will drop fireballs at you.
Mm-hmm. And occasionally they'll reach in and tweak his traps. So that the implication is that like this dungeon complex is full of all of these, pinball challenges essentially, and that most of these were set up by the creature specifically to delay or obstruct you.
Yeah, let's talk about like the core mechanic of the game, because you're talking about, I think Zelda is an interesting comparison. It's really any sort of dungeon crawling where you'd enter into a room and either kill all the bad guys, or in this case, complete a small breakout or pinball style challenge. So, a really simple example would be that you just walk in and there's like 8 different what I would call bumpers or like all around, and there'll just be a little floating ball in the middle of the room. And your character, you go up and you have basically one primary action, which is swing. And it's like hitting the ball with a bat. It goes flying in the general direction that you hit it in, and it's going to bounce. If it hits a bumper, it's going to continue to bounce. Eventually, if it just hits off walls, it'll sort of fade out. But if it hits like pinball, like, I don't know, items, the bumpers or your bat again, your sword again, then it stays alive and it keeps going. And the rooms are a series of challenges that kind of escalate from how much can you keep the ball going and hitting all the bumpers before either like a timer runs out or you run out of, or the ball fades away and the whole thing starts over. Some of them are really, really simple. Some of them are incredibly complex that require almost like near perfect maneuvering of your guy and hitting the ball back and forth, or oftentimes having multi balls flying around the room.
That's a pretty good setup for the sort of basic gameplay of each room. Before we dive too far into mechanics, because I have a lot to say about the mechanics of this game, I want to describe it a little more generally first, because I don't want to go too far into the weeds there before we talk about like what the game looks like and some other stuff about it. Like Shane mentioned that you're playing as a bot C. Well, the world of the game is, pretty fun, pretty like lightly sketched, but it takes place in a town called Mirage, I think. And the town is
populated by but a single frog.
Yeah, it's beset by this massive sandstorm that apparently has been hovering over the town and who knows how much else of the world for hundreds of years. And at the center of the town is a massive mountain, and built into the mountain is a massive weather machine. And you are a bot. Apparently there were many of you in the past, but you are the last remaining bot.
It's like Wall-E.
Yeah, exactly. And the bot is named Bot C. And Bot C is it sort of comes back alive at the beginning of the game. Apparently you've been sitting dormant somewhere, and starts up his presumably programmed quest of trying to go get the weather machine working. There are some other characters, but very few. I was kind of expecting slightly more. There's a shop in the town where you can meet Danielle, the gigantic purple alligator, I guess, who is a great character design. And then there's also
very large that Danielle, and useful for upgrades.
Yeah, I liked that. There's not a whole lot to do with the shop. Like, you're not going in there to buy items exactly. You're mostly just going back there to upgrade your core, which we can talk about when we get to talking about the mechanics. But it is nice to have somebody to go back and sort of say hi to in between runs. And then also at various points, especially sort of in the hub, the sort of center of the mountain, you'll meet Roger T. Frog. Roger is one of a long line of frogs. As you go through the mountain, you'll be seeing like evidence of the people who designed and built the machine, but who were stopped from activating it by the creature. So Roger is the descendant of the frogs that built the weather machine. And then I guess the final character would be the creature itself. The creature is really, you never really see more than the creature's massive bandaged hands, which are like really weird and gnarled and have like rings and bandages on. And
to me, it looked robotic as well, like just like the Bot C. To me, the creature looks like it has maybe screws and nails. Maybe that read as rings and things to you.
Yeah, maybe so. Honestly, you don't really get a great look at the creature. You see its eyes, which are just giant, malevolent eyes, and it speaks to you, which I wasn't expecting. I loved
real chatty
dialogue with the creature. Every now and then it just sort of pops its head in to say like, "You'll never succeed. I stopped them before and I'll stop them again." Why is the creature living down inside the mountain? Why is it trying to stop the weather machine from being built? Totally unclear. But
why doesn't it just use its giant hands to tear apart this Bot C instead of making it go through an extremely elaborate series of traps and tests? I don't know.
Also don't know. But it kind of doesn't matter. It's just it's nice in terms of like the tone. I mean, like, I love that title. Creature in the Well is just like...
It's menacing.
It's very menacing. And the creature itself is very menacing. So I was really drawn in by the sort of setup. And I also like the art style.
The art style to this is interesting. It tries to kind of combine this post-apocalyptic... kind of grungy world aesthetic with and kind of a sci-fi look to most of the spaces that have, things might inside this. You're crawling around inside of a giant machine, right? So everything is rolling sci-fi doors and everything's mechanical, but with sand and nature starting to creep in, and then the visual. I guess the visual style and color of the game almost tries for the same kind of posterized, flattened color look that typified games like Ape Out, just trying to imitate like a Saul Bass kind of look.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Or has this kind of, I don't know, what's the term that they used to throw around in the 90s for games that had a cartoon filter applied to them?
Cell shaded, I guess.
Cell shaded. Yeah, it's not exactly cell shaded, but it's just an example of like flat color over lots of detail.
Yeah, it has a kind of an illustrated look, but without any hard lines. Lots of sort of like broad areas of color without outlines. And where it gets detailed, you'll see a sort of spatter print kind of look to it that right. looks a lot like something about the style really reminds me a lot of the really excellently illustrated posters that you see for the National Park Service.
Yeah.
It has that kind of vibe to it, particularly when you see things like the mountain itself or some of the larger vistas. When you get into the actual machine, then you're getting these very functional glowing things that you need to hit because they're glowing. But like the sort of when you see landscapes, for example, in this, it just looks like a surreal version of a national park poster. It's a really cool look.
Yeah, I think their use of just like black space is pretty interesting as well. So when you're in the various dungeons, when you're in a main room, it takes up the majority of the screen, but there's every main room is connected by a series of tunnels. So a lot of times you are going through tunnels, and when you're going through these, or hallways, I guess would probably be a better way to describe it, but when you're going through a hallway, the majority of the screen is nothing, and it's just these like very isolated, sort of cramped feeling hallways that you're going through, and then it opens up into the bigger pinball style challenges. And I think it adds a lot to the design aesthetic, is that oftentimes it's incredibly simple and very straightforward, and the only thing that you really have to look at is your little bot and the direction that you need to go.
It is very functional. Like it does know when to layer on the detail and when to kind of pare it back and stay simple. And that's super important in something like, pinball tables are kind of notorious for like having a lot of crap on them, right? And sometimes that's distracting because what you really need to know is like, okay, what's glowing? What do I need to hit? This game is kind of going to pare back the detail when it needs to kind of just show you, okay, here's where you need to hit. And then it layers on the detail when it's like, okay, here's something for a moment for you to look around.
Yeah, I felt like this game could have been put out by like Supergiant as well. I got some like Transistor vibes.
I kind of see what you mean. Yeah, totally.
And that might be more the like aesthetic of it, and not necessarily the color palettes. But I definitely could have seen this being released like after Pyre.
If I have a complaint about this game, and it's like visual design and stuff like that, it's that you have a ton of repetition of the cool visual elements of this game. Like if you go from the dungeon is like, I don't know how many parts, like 5, 6 parts.
There are 8 total sort of zones, I guess, or like kind of mini dungeons.
Classic. So yeah. But they all look the same except for maybe like a color swap, pretty much.
Well, yeah, there's definitely color swapped versions of the same room across multiple dungeons. They do each, I think, have some kind of little quirk that's unique to each area, but there's definitely Yeah, there's definitely rooms that repeat, to the point where I was a little surprised at how many rooms repeat occasionally. I didn't really mind that because sometimes it is like nice to have like a mastery of something where you're like, oh, I've done this room before and I can do it again, but better or faster. And so I
That's
didn't mind
true.
that.
It's there are some of those rooms that just pop up. There are a lot of rooms in this that you are extremely optional, and it almost took me a while to realize like you're gated as your progress through the dungeons is gated with energy, and it gives you far more energy than you need by just playing a small percentage of the rooms. And you can skip tons of these rooms. But the ones that are really skippable are the kind that you'll be playing again and again. There'll be like a room where, there's just a ton of paddles, The part of the appeal of the kind of pinball mechanics is trying the same thing, trying the ball at the same toys over and over again, and the thrill of when you get it just perfect. And like in breakout style games, that's maybe get the ball back behind the paddles and it bounces around and clears a shit ton of them and you rack up a bunch of points or whatever.
Yeah. And talking about the energy, I mean, there are rooms that are like not even a challenge. It's just like walk in, here's a whole bunch of bumpers that are going to give you energy. And if you need it, you can just spend like 2 minutes breaking them all just so that you get more energy. I also think that some of the repeating of rooms too, I know we're going to dig into deeper on mechanics, but you gain different abilities essentially as you progress through the game. And I do think it's like a little bit of an opportunity to say like, so I don't have to go back. If I wanted to try one of the earlier challenges with one of the new abilities, I don't have to go back into one of the previous dungeons, which you can do. Even once you beat a challenge, it sort of like resets and you can do it again. I don't have to go back. I can just wait. I'm probably going to get a similar challenge in front of me, and I can try it with this new ability as well.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and talk a little more in depth about the mechanics because before I go too far, I want to say this is a hard game. This is probably like one of the hardest games that I've completed in a while. It doesn't seem hard at the start, neither does Breakout, like hit the thing with the balls. But there are some really difficult challenges in this. And like, if you look up reviews from other outlets, like probably the first thing that you'll see in a lot of them is like, this game was harder than I expected. And like, it really is very, very hard, particularly towards the end. But in a way that I found really rewarding once I kind of got over the humps of that. And I want to talk a little bit about the way that it kind of uses its mechanics, because I think it's really unique and cool. The game starts with you start with two swords, right? Or two things you can hit with. You've got what it calls your strike weapon and your charge weapon. So the strike weapon is just for hitting balls, right? It just hits a ball and it goes in whatever direction you are pointing with your analog stick when you hit with that weapon. That's one button. And then there's another button for your charge weapon. Your charge weapon is more about grabbing balls and charging them up. So yeah, I know. Sorry. So we're just gonna have a blanket. Like I need a blanket indulgence from everyone here that I'm gonna be using the word balls a lot, and I'm not making innuendos. Okay, just everyone get it out now. We're gonna say the word balls probably a few hundred more times in this episode. So a big part of when you're hitting a bumper, what you're doing actually is you're getting a ball, charging it up with your charge weapon, bouncing it back at the bumper, and that energy goes into or comes out of the thing that you hit. And so there's the fact that you have these two separate actions, kind of grabbing balls with your sword and then hitting them out with your other sword. The big thing that surprised me about it is that like when you're using your charge weapon, you can hit it once and it kind of like hits the balls and they kind of hover in front of you for a second before you either hit them or they sort of drift away. Or you can keep hitting it or hold it down and it'll just kind of do that. And you sort of swing your charge weapon around to grab balls for as long as you want. And then you hit them with the strike weapon.
And it also, one thing I really like about the charge weapon is that it has has a vacuum amount of space. You would expect, like, you don't have to be perfect with it, I guess is what I'm saying. You swing it out in front of you at a wider angle than I was originally expecting. So when you've got a lot of balls just like flying around you, you don't have to be perfect at grabbing them out of the air. You just have to be kind of at their general area and doing it, and you'll suck them in, and you can sort of store them in front of you to re-aim. And in my experience, a lot of the challenges was that balance of I need to have some of these bouncing around and just continuing to go, and then I need to be out there sort of grabbing and redirecting the what is probably at this point for some of the challenges like 4, 5, 6 different balls just bouncing around, and I'm grabbing them and redirecting them constantly so that they're going at the bumper and not just bouncing off the walls and eventually like dissipating.
Exactly, yeah. And what I think gets really interesting about this is that it uses those two very simple mechanics in a lot of games will have like sort of primary mechanics, right? You can charge balls, you can hit balls, but then there's often these sort of secondary mechanics that kind of emerge out of the combination of those existing mechanics. And so here, like your other sort of verbs are you've got a dash that you can do.
Yep.
And of course, obviously you can walk around. There's a sort of interesting interaction between those three mechanics, your dash, your charge, and your hit. When you're charging, you can't usually walk. And that's good because you want to be able to, you need, in a game like this, you need to be able to plant your feet and use the analog stick to point where you want to hit without having to walk in the direction that you're about to hit the balls, because that would be too hard to manage. But if you are, but there are times where you might want to do that. So there's different sort of tricks you have to learn that feel like they're almost sort of accidents of the mechanics in a way, but they're very deliberately designed, and the game requires you to get good with them. So, for example, if you are holding down the charge weapon button and you're pointing in a direction, you are standing still and pointing, and you get a little arrow showing you the direction you're about to hit your ball. If you're tapping the charge weapon button, then you can kind of walk while charging. And it means that it's a little harder to be accurate about where you're about to hit unless you decide to plant your feet, but you can kind of do a slow walk while charging. And then sort of further than that, you can also dash while you're charging. So you can't walk while charging, but you can dash. And so you can do this kind of dance of like charge, dash, charge, dash, charge, dash.
So this in particular... You compared this in one of our conversations earlier to Hyper Light Drifter, and I don't really think that comparison holds up in a lot of ways, but...
This is better. I like this a lot better than Hyper Light Drifter.
Definitely not. Absolutely not.
We'll agree to disagree.
I also thought it was like Hyper Light Drifter, but...
Go ahead,
but
Shane.
The dashing is where it is a lot like Hyper Light Drifter.
Yeah.
The gameplay in Hyper Light Drifter was really about having a very solid grasp of exactly how far your dash is, and using the dash to maneuver while simultaneously dealing with a large number of kind of aggressive enemies. And this doesn't necessarily have enemies. It has fireballs and bumpers that blow up in a giant circle and destroy you, and it has laser beams that can blast you and drain your health and things like that. But there's no real enemies, and so that's one of the big places it's, I would say, different from something like HLD.
Nice abbreviation. And
one of my favorites of all time.
Something I wanted to talk about, and you were talking earlier about, Raygan, the challenge of this game. And to me, there's sort of two big buckets of challenge. It's either the room is going to require basically near perfect execution, and that's usually because of timers or hitting the ball at a specific angle to sort of hit a chain of events. One example is it's really early on, but you have to hit a ball exactly right so that it hits off one bumper at a perfect angle to go hit another bumper, which reveals another bumper. It has to hit that, and it goes in this sort of square pattern that if you didn't hit it at the exact right angle to start with, it would go off to miss, and it starts over the whole challenge. So the challenge is like, can I hit this ball? I think it's actually two balls, but you charge and bring them together. I have to hit them at exactly the right angle, and so that their ricochet follows a perfect pattern to complete the puzzle. There's other times where it's there's going to be like a timer on the bumpers that you have to hit them enough to clear them before the timer runs down. And that's a lot of the challenge too, is that you have to sort of manage the chaos of the balls bouncing around the room to where they're actually hitting the bumpers that their timer is going to run out first, so you can clear those. And there's no real danger necessarily. You have to do it exactly right or you run out of time and the whole room resets. The other type of challenge is because you do have a health bar in this game. I think they call it energy bar. And there's, as Shane was just saying, there's all sorts of things that will drain your energy. Not like straight up bad guys, but sometimes the bumpers themselves shoot a laser beam. So you have to like dodge that and hit it with the ball. So often these rooms that are very laser or bad guy focused don't have as many timers, but you're constantly maneuvering your character to not get hurt. And you're either going to like beat it or you're going to die and have to start over. And then when the game gets really challenging is when it has both of those. It has both timers.
Which is very often just the boss areas. The boss areas are usually like real final exams of all of the different hazards are happening at once.
Yeah, there's like a timer and there's lasers, so you have to, not only do you have to do perfect execution on the pinball challenge, but you also have to do perfect execution of the like action RPG not platformer, but like action RPG hack and slash thing where you're dodging enemies, you're getting out of the way, you're setting yourself up for like the future shot. And it's a lot to manage at one time because you also can get in the way of your own like balls, like they are bouncing around and you might have shot one at a different time and it bounces back and hits you and it makes you kind of stutter. Or if it was hit with a hard enough degree or it bounced off a certain thing that will charge it up, you can actually be damaged by the ball that you hit, right? So there's so much going on the screen at different times. And that's really where it gets really, really challenging.
Yeah. And I mentioned that sort of like these mechanics that kind of build out of the very simple mechanics. The kind of final one that like becomes the thing you have to really internalize is that there's a certain kind of rhythm that you can use when using a combination of the dash and the charge, where you can essentially dash at full speed around while still charging. It's a very hard thing to figure out how to do. I only at first felt like I only did it by accident or by button mashing. And then eventually, as I kind of got better at the game, I found myself able to like feel like I could fly across the thing very precisely while also charging and shooting balls at very precisely. It sort of really builds on itself with these mechanics that like do have a lot of room for you to sort of get a sort of a finesse with them that initially isn't apparent.
Yeah, and to the point where you have to be moving around like that just in order to catch the balls that are flying around. So you might have to dodge around through a dangerous level where fireballs are flying at you, dashing around a bunch of fireballs, kiting them a little bit while still trying to line up a catch of one of your balls in order to fire it off and hit a target. So that kind of stuff is really cool. For me, it really, really helped that I was able to reassign buttons in this game.
Yeah, let's talk about the controls, because I think the first thing that I would say, we didn't mention that this game is on Nintendo Switch, and it's also on Xbox One and Windows 10. And if you have an Xbox One or are on a PC, it's part of the Game Pass subscription, which is very nice, because if you are on that, you can just download this and play it right away without paying anything extra apart from your subscription fee. On the Nintendo Switch, I think it's $15. And I played it on Switch. And initially, like everything I usually play on Switch, I tried to play this in handheld mode, and I found I basically couldn't. And I think you might find, I don't know if everyone would have the same reaction to this, but for me, the game required a kind of precision and kind of like really like button mashing, not quite mashing, but like that feeling where you're like really squeezing the heck out of your controller. I found that,
to me, the biggest issue is you're really going to have to be really precise with your timing of 3 different buttons: dash, charge, and smash.
Yeah.
And if you're not able to really on something like a Joy-Con in portable mode, like my thumb covers the entire like set of all the tiny Joy-Con buttons. And it's hard for me to be like really reliably timing back and forth between, for example, B and X constantly on something like a Joy-Con.
Yeah.
So I moved the all the paddle related actions onto the triggers. so that I only am using the B button, and then I'm charging with left trigger and smashing with right trigger. And that got me playing in portable mode. And I did that pretty early on. I really recommend that for people that find the controls are a little iffy.
Yeah, that definitely helps. For me, another, and I mean, I just moved one of those to one of the triggers. I kept my actions on like B and Y where they were. But the other problem that I ran into on the Switch in portable mode is that, like Nate was mentioning, there's a lot of times where you have to have like extraordinarily precise aim. And that's kind of hard on the, like, at least for me, I have a hard time being extremely precise with the analog sticks on the Switch Joy-Cons. Yeah. So I found like I had a much easier time either with the Pro controller, or I have one of those 8BitDo dongles, and I paired a DualShock 4 with the Switch and played on my TV, and both of those were like enormously easier to manage for me. Like just having a bigger, chunkier controller with an analog stick that I just feel a little more precise with.
Yeah, it's interesting. The more we've been talking about this element of it, especially when it gets more difficult, one of the like game genres that I think it actually gets pretty close to is like a dual stick shooter.
I can see that for sure.
I extremely staggered throughout the entire game. I wished that I could have assigned like the smash attack. What is the term that he uses for that?
The strike, I think.
Strike. I wished I could have assigned the strike to the right stick, so that I could have, or maybe the charge to the right stick. I don't know, but like, I really wanted to be able, and this is a way in which it's kind of a lot like Hyper Light Drifter. Where that's definitely not a dual stick shooter. Like your facing direction really matters. And it's true in this game, your facing direction really matters. I just wished I had a way to change my facing direction by like using the right stick.
Yeah, the thing about this is like it really is designed in this way where you are facing in the direction that you're moving, and if you want to be able to like aim your ball in full 360 degrees, you essentially have to stop moving for a second. And sometimes that needing to stop moving is very dangerous. So yeah, that's where like there were those sort of second level mechanics where you can kind of be able to move around very quickly, and that kind of alleviated that. But like I can see what you mean. I think it would be a very different game if you made this sort of like dual stick experience.
Yeah.
Part of it is really just sort of the like walking around and then setting up and then firing off your shots. But I definitely know what you mean. Like it is sometimes a little frustrating. Let's talk about some of the different tools that you collect, because the other big part of this, obviously, you've got your different. You've got your strike tools and your charge tools. The strike tools are your sort of sword for throwing or batting balls around, and then the charge tools are for sort of collecting or drawing in balls. But as you play through the game, there's going to be rooms where there are these sort of big circular charge things that you need to complete a challenge in order to activate. And many times the reward for activating those or for completing the room is just you get a lot more energy. But sometimes they unlock a secret path. And those secret paths usually lead to either a new weapon for you to use or an old core, which is an upgrade system that we can talk about a little later. And you get a number of different upgrades to, or like different versions of your tools that you can use throughout the game. And by the end of the game, you probably will need to find yourself making a lot of switches back and forth depending on the sort of challenge that you're facing. So, for example, the very final boss, I think I used every single tool I had at least once, with the exception of some of them that are kind of useless, kind of throw-offs, like the frying pan. I don't think I used that one. But like there's some pretty interesting tools. The first one that I found was the dual blades, which kind of adds a laser sight to your charge. And if I had one, I mean, I have a number of complaints about this game. I loved it, but I have a number of complaints. And the first one that I ran across was like, why does this have to be just this one specific weapon? I really wished that I had the sort of laser sight that lets you see where your ball is going to go with a little more precision all of the time. And there were times,
sure, because that's way easier if you know exactly where the ball's going to go.
Oh, it's a huge, but it's like there were challenges later in the game where it's like, oh, I have to be using the like the chain blade here, for example, or maybe the fan blade, but I really wish I could see where I was going to be hitting with a little more precision, particularly on the Switch Joy-Cons. Like, dang, the dual blades with their like little laser sight makes a massive difference. Personally, I would prefer a more sort of like upgrade path kind of thing here, where maybe you've got a sword with, say, 2 or 3 slots on it, and you can equip multiple features to it, rather than just having each weapon be its own thing with one unique feature that you can use and none of the others at that same time. But like, yeah, any like favorite weapons that you guys ran across?
Well, the fan blade is very, very helpful, which lets you take the energy from the ball and give yourself a little bit of healing. And there were times that I would basically be in the middle of a fight and be able to charge up a ball, hit it off of something that's going to charge it, and then bring it right back and catch it and give myself a little bit of healing to stay alive for longer.
Yeah, that was huge for me in the boss battles. The fan blade, a lot of the times the
never found it.
Well, it's very important if you can go back and look for it. It's actually it's pretty early, but it's
the first one I found.
Yeah. That's something else about this. It's easy to miss some of these upgrades. And
they're all. That was a weird thing about the game. It doesn't give you any of the upgrades based on actually progressing and completing the dungeons. It gives them all to you based on finding secrets.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And I like the idea that, I might beat this game with a different set of items than you found. But
honestly, you
kind of
need
annoying.
Most of them in order to beat the game, would be my assessment.
Well, I think it's not like it says secret revealed, but I really don't think that's right, because you get them by beating a room that happens to unlock a treasure or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
but with so many of the rooms being optional, I'm sure there are rooms that I skipped. But anyway, we'll tell you my favorite weapons that I found.
Yeah, I just think they do that to incentivize, yes, you don't have to do every room.
Yeah.
But you should.
But the secrets are always those rooms with the big central kind of things, right? The big central kind of round things. And those also tend to be the most interesting or challenging challenges in the game. There's very few of them that repeat. And so I think it's the game's way of telling you these rooms, and you'll see them on the map. You can tell if you've completed them or not, so you know whether you need to go back and try one. These types of rooms are important to do. The other types of rooms are less important, and you can skip them if you want. But those rooms, I would say, try to never skip them. Or if you do skip them, go back to them later. Because there's probably 1 in 5 chance on any one of those rooms there's some sort of important secret that it unlocks.
The weapons that I wound up using a lot, some I found early, and some I found as I started to go back and try and check off some of those rooms that I had managed to get past. But one of the... You brought up, Raygan, earlier, engaging with mechanics that aren't explained or tutorialized.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a weapon that I think is exactly an example of that, and that is the twig. And it was one of my favorite weapons. Did anybody else use the twig?
I use it very little.
Yeah. So all the description you get on the twig is a branch from some random bush. Could be used as a charge weapon, though it has no power limiter. Okay, so what's a power limiter? I don't know. But what the twig does is normally the charge weapons let you grab 3 balls. And if you use a charge weapon to catch more than that third ball, one of the balls that you have will kind of disappear in a puff of smoke. And that's not the case for the twig. The twig can hold, I think, up to 7 balls. But once you get more than that third ball, it starts to drain your health. And it can charge the balls, and the charging of the balls, by the way, the balls all do... Have we talked about how much the damage the balls do and how it's related to the cores?
No, we haven't talked about that yet, but I mean, the quick version is that you can upgrade your core throughout the game, and the core is what allows you to add charge to the balls.
Also in hidden secret rooms, you find old cores.
Yeah, and so the higher your core level, which I think maxes out at 10, but I might be wrong, The higher your core level, basically the more damage you're doing once you fully charge a ball and hit it at something.
Yeah. So, having lots of charged balls on the screen is good for a lot of reasons. And in a lot of situations where maybe you feel like you're having trouble juggling the balls, or you are trying to swing just wildly and have your balls go all over the place.
Sorry, I know we said I said we're not. Okay, please continue.
And this is true in a lot of boss battles where you want your balls all over the screen. You just want balls everywhere, because there's lots of fireballs, and then you've got your balls, and your balls will destroy the fireballs. Shout out to watch out for fireballs. But I've been trying to bait Raygan into making a balls joke this entire time.
I made a vow.
But it's true. That was what's really cool about the twig is you can have more than twice the number of balls you normally have on screen. And it doesn't hurt you if you catch just 3. So you could spam these 7 balls out, and then just do catch and swat to keep them going.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of boss battles that you can just cruise through if you have just 7 balls out on the screen, knocking into everything randomly all over the place.
See, health is such a precious resource. There's so many. And this might also be because I found the fan blade pretty late and had no easy way to recover health for most of it. But the health was such a precious resource for me that I found that too much of a risk. So I didn't use that tool very often. I used a lot of a combo of the chain blade, which is a charge weapon that has a pretty long reach. You can grab balls from farther away, and also has in the description it says it provides sure footing, which basically means if you get hit with a ball that's at high velocity, there's a lot of these sort of ball cannons that shoot balls out at you and kind of stagger you. But if you're using the chain blade, it doesn't do that. You can catch those without stagger. And then
Did anybody else find the magnets?
Oh yeah, the magnet was also good, but I found that was kind of tricky because the balls would sometimes orbit you with the magnet. So the chain blade was better for me. It had almost as much reach as the magnet, but less of the downside. But then I'd also combine that a lot with the thunder staff, which is a strike tool that adds a kind of an electric arcing to the balls. And that was super important in a lot of the later boss battles because they have a lot of these sort of clusters of very small targets rather than large targets to hit. And if you if you're using the thunder weapon, then you could hit one of them and some of that damage would arc to the nearby ones. And it just meant that you didn't have to be quite as precise. You didn't have to hit 10 very small targets. You could hit them as if they were big targets and it would kind of cover the whole area.
And it also is kind of a damage multiplier.
Yeah.
It's arcing that damage off. That, I also should say, one of the best looking weapons in the game is this thunder staff.
Oh yeah, it's
just
cool.
is cool looking.
Purple.
It's like a big purple thing with a double pointy head on the top of it. It's a cool looking item.
Yeah.
One of my favorite pieces of design in this game. Looks better than the robot.
Just a couple other quick tools I want to mention just because they are important to the gameplay in some way or other. One of the earliest strike tools you'll find is the focus hammer, which slows down time while you're aiming, which is pretty cool. And that's another one where I really, really would have liked the option to take that upgrade and add it to something else and combine it with others. But it's always it's a pretty basic strike tool, but you get that little extra moment to aim, which is very helpful. There's an axe that you can use that splits balls, which is a kind of way of creating multi-balls. So if you have, if you're in a room where there's lots and lots and lots of targets and you just need to spam lots of balls to hit things all over the place and you don't need to be precise, using the axe is very good. And then Shane mentioned the magnetic fork, which is a kind of it's a charge weapon that draws balls in from farther away than any of the other tools, which I found useful in certain situations, but kind of dangerous in others, because sometimes what that would mean would be I'd be trying to grab a ball and the magnet would kind of bring it in a kind of an arc that would mean that it would end up actually kind of like arcing into something I didn't want it to hit. But it was sometimes very useful. There were some puzzles that were like explicitly designed for that, where you couldn't reach the balls without something like that. So lots of options. And a big part of the gameplay, particularly late in the game, is choosing a pair of those two that sort of synergizes for the particular challenge that you're trying to beat.
So Raygan, earlier you were talking about health and health being a finite and valuable resource, and I agree entirely. But I do think this game was very forgiving in how it handles health, but also kind of frustrating in how it handles health.
You have me very curious, because I didn't find anything about this game felt forgiving to me. This is a very difficult game. Go ahead.
The only thing that I think that is forgiving about it is once you've completed a challenge, once you've completed a room, it's done. You don't have to do it again.
Yeah, that's true.
You can, but like I think there's a world out there where this game comes out and you're expected to like chain together successful rooms, and it doesn't. If you complete a challenge, it's unlocked, it's done, and if you die, you can run right through it. And you don't have to
what you're
do it
talking
again.
about there is essentially the bosses. The only part of the game that really does operate that way is the boss rushes, and also the very final dungeon, kind of leading up to the bosses, which is also sort of operates that way. You have to kind of complete it in one run.
But otherwise, you can kind of keep trying them, and if you don't succeed, if you die or just like the timer runs out, you can just keep going and keep trying it, and then once you've completed it, it's done. The very unforgiving thing, in my opinion, about health, one is, well, besides it being like often very challenging and very easy to die, because there's all sorts of things that are going to hurt and kill you, and there's very little way to get your health back, is that when you do die, you get kicked out of the dungeon entirely, and not just back to the front door, but like all the way back to the town, where you get thrown out with like 1 health, and you land on the outside of the town, and you have to run all the way back into sort of the machine, go back to the specific dungeon that you've selected, go through it, and run all the way through it to get back to the room just to try it again. And I think it works kind of like thematically, though again, I don't understand why the creature doesn't just like cut you in half. But for the most part, I just found myself like, I gotta run all the way back there. And it's also the kind of game where like the dash move makes you run slightly faster, but it's like a staggered dash. So it reminds me of like,
I want to talk about that, because it's not very obvious and it never mentions it, but so you can do the dash, which gives you a little boost, right? But if you do the dash and then you continue to hold the dash button down, then after about 2 seconds of holding it down, it starts increasing your run speed.
I had no idea.
Yeah, to the point where you get to be very fast. Like you can run through the dungeon at like pretty high speeds.
Oh, well, that's good to know, because I was doing like the stupid Ocarina of Time Link rolling across the entire field. It's just like dash. Yeah, dash, 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 dash. And that always kind of drives me crazy. So that's good to know. Yeah. I wish that it would tell you that.
I wish it would too. And I also honestly wish it wouldn't do the like toss you the whole way out of the dungeon thing. There should be checkpoints.
Well, and why does it kick you out at 0 or at 1 health? Because there's a health pool right at the beginning of the machine. So what it means is every time you die, you have to run back to the beginning of the machine, go sit in this pool of white goo for like 15 seconds.
Stop the podcast. I have never played a video game where you're a robot who heals by getting in a hot tub. It makes no sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think maybe thematically it's supposed to feel like exhausting that you lost, but the challenge of this game is so high that you are losing, at least for me, you're losing a lot. So I'm constantly having to be kicked out. What I was doing was like hitting dash like 1,000 times to get back to the room, go sit in that pool for 15 seconds to heal up, and then go back into the dungeon and work your way back to the room that you started.
Yeah.
And I just like, I know that's kind of how games always used to work, is like you kind of have to start everything over, but because you don't actually do anything, there's no new challenge. You're just literally every time you have to start over.
Just walk all the way back. Yeah.
You have to walk all the way back. You have to sit in the healing pool and then go in. It's like, at least kick me back at full health so I don't have to just like stop and sit in this thing for 10 seconds and then go forward. It became more of a nuisance than it was like, I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was trying to add. I don't know why.
Like if this were like a roguelike or something, I would feel like that made sense. Like if this was being randomized or something and we were doing like a Sheeran the Wanderer kind of thing or something here. But here it is just like everything stays unlocked and it's just about walking back to where you were. I agree that I don't think that's a good design decision for this game. I got used to it. Sure. And there are some ways that like the game will provide you some shortcuts. So for one, if you do get to a boss room, it opens up a portal that is at the beginning of the area. So you don't have to walk all the way to the boss room. If you die in the room just before the boss room, you're going to have to walk all the way back.
You die in real life.
Yes. But like you're going to have to walk all the way back. But if you die in the boss room, or one of the boss rooms, then you get a portal to get you right back there. So that's
you still have to walk out of the well, go to the machine, sit in the healing pool, go to the tunnel, and then go through the portal, and then you get to try again.
Yes. And one quick thing though. Did you notice that there's a door? I don't know exactly at what point it opens, but it was pretty early in the game. There's a door on one of the buildings right next to where the creature tosses you out. And it goes straight back into the machine room where you can heal.
What?
Yeah.
Son of a...
Yes. So that'll save you at least 15, 20 seconds if you're...
There is so many things. Like, there's so much stuff on this game. I also have really, really enjoyed the gameplay of this game. But there's so many things that I wish this game would just tell you a little bit. I constantly... And for those of you who are in our Discord, which we haven't talked about, you've seen me like, I don't know where to go next. And then as soon as I see it, it's like super obvious. But like, I wish there was a little bit more pushing in the direction of like, understanding the roadmap of this game. Where am I supposed to go? How do I get there faster? All of that would be great because it doesn't teach
things like the running is like super not obvious, and I discovered it by accident after already having completed like 2 or 3 dungeons.
Yeah, why is that obscured? Why, and trust me, like there's a lot of value in like exploration and like figuring out game mechanics, and I think they do a really good job of that in the actual pinball environments and like learning how the bumpers work. That's all fine.
Yeah, like making the sort of like dodge or like a charge dash a kind of a discovery that emerges from the base mechanics is great. It's a really cool thing. But like running does not need to be a discovery like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I really, really like once I was in the dungeons, I was like, this game is awesome. And I'm like, it's challenging and it's satisfying and it's really, really good. It was like everything leading up to you getting into those was like super obscure to me and kind of frustrating at times. Yeah. Just minorly.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Like there are things about this game that like I loved this game, but very few games have made me as angry as some of the parts of this game made me. Like there are certain boss challenges that just about made me throw my Switch against the wall. Like really, really wild stuff that just like, I don't see how this is ever going to be possible. And then I'd figure out, actually, if I'm careful about my movement in this particular way, if I use this particular set of weapons, etc., then I can get past this seemingly impossible thing. And that feels like a triumph. That's great. But like, there's so many things about this game that just straight up made me mad. Most of them I felt like were redeemed in some way by becoming a sort of a triumph once you overcame them. But there are these little things like the running being like an obscure mechanic. Like, why is that? Or like, frankly, the whole process of getting back to where you died when you die is like, I don't really have a defense for that. I think that is something that like, I don't like that. I don't like that about it. And I would love to have seen it done a little differently here.
Or for spawning you. The thing that bugged me the most isn't so much the running back. It's the fact that I have to run back to the hot tub and sit motionless in it for about 3 seconds before I can actually run back to the dungeon.
Yeah.
If you would just take that out and have me like regenerate health when I go back into the dungeon, it would have saved me so much frustration in this game.
It's a small thing, but it is one of those things like when you just died by the hair of your teeth and you want to go try that same thing again and see if you can do it without screwing up whatever tiny thing you screwed up and ended up dying. Like any little delay feels like an eternity, even if it is very fast.
Well, and you're going to die, possibly hundreds of times. So
there's statistics in this game. I will tell you how many times I died.
Yeah.
If my Switch...
And part of our, while you're pulling that up, part of our whole thing is like games that respect your time, right? And so there were just little things that I wish that they would have done to just like get me back into the core of the
fun
game.
part.
Yeah, the fun part.
So for me, deaths in this game, 106. And that means that 106 times I got thrown out of the dungeon completely and had to make the whole walk back. And that's like, it's a short walk, but that's 106 times in a game that I think took me around 5 or 6 hours to complete.
Yeah, and so probably 25 of your minutes.
Yeah, like a pretty significant amount of time. And I should also say about the amount of time this game takes to complete. Like, it's going to vary a lot based on like how much and how fast you're able to sort of internalize those like unspoken mechanics that this game kind of has. And I kind of like that about it. I would say that it's probably going to be an under 10-hour game for most folks. For whatever reason, the Switch's like time played clock on this for me, I think got screwed up by the fact that I left it in sleep mode and it wasn't correctly accounting for that. So it says I played this game for 72 hours. Definitely not. But like, I think this game probably is in about the like 5 to 10 hour range for people, and how exactly long it takes you is going to vary a lot depending on just sort of like how comfortable you're able to get with some of the more advanced mechanics.
Yeah.
Is anybody else still bugged by the fact that the Switch doesn't give you good times on this? Because my creature in the well still says first played 4 days ago, which means I haven't hit whatever the threshold is for it to actually tell me how long I've played.
Well, yeah, no, like if you go into the settings on the Switch, yeah, same thing for me. It just says like first played 8 days ago. And it, for games that I haven't played in a while, it'll say you've played 5 or more hours or something like that. And it's like, well, that's not like, I know we're kind of like the weirdos who like, we do a game.
We care about how long we're spending in these things.
We really care. Like it's useful information for us.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, the PS4 will just tell you. Like Steam will just tell you. And there's always problems with these systems. Like you leave things suspended or something, and it's always ticking that clock. But like when the game can't tell how long it's been running, and the system can't tell you how long it's been running, it is a little frustrating. I agree, Shane. Yeah. It's not something that probably will bug most folks, but it bugs me. So I really, really loved this game, and I don't think this game is going to be for everybody. Like, I think that if the idea of an ultra challenging pinball, like an ultra challenging precision ball swatter, doesn't appeal to you, then maybe this won't be your thing. But for me, this felt like it was made for me. Like I really, really enjoyed this game. I got real mad at it, and then I just had this what felt like a real personal triumph beating the final boss. And I mean, I loved it. I just really, really like this game. And I know that this developer, Flight School, mostly has done VR games in the past, and I have played nothing else that they have put together. So I am, going to be keeping an eye on what these guys do, because they've clearly kind of got me, right? I loved this game. Might not be for everybody, but it really, really worked for me. Yeah.
I love a challenging game, and there's some frustrations with this one. Some of it just built off of how challenging it is, but overall, it's a complete experience, and one that I don't think you can find between the art, the music, and the gameplay. There's nothing else.
Yeah, super unique. Really I've never played anything like it, and that's always something to look for. And when I've never played anything like something, and it just sort of speaks to me on some sort of mechanical level, like that's a gift. I was very excited to play this. So I definitely recommend it, and I particularly recommend it if you've got that Microsoft Game Pass. It's on those platforms, and you can just download it and give it a try and see if it's for you. And if not, check out. They've got a trailer that they call the Creature in the Well 101 trailer, where they kind of show you all of how the game works with some voiceover by one of the lead developers, kind of explaining it. So if you need the visual, that's pretty helpful too.
Tutorials like that are great. They should be in the game.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, we have been skipping for the last little while our "What's Making Us Happy This Week" segment, because we've been having some weird episodes and time has been a factor and everything. But I wanted to bring it back. So Nate, what's making you happy this week?
Yeah, so I just stumbled upon, it was recommended to me, a band that I think our listeners will enjoy. It is called Magic Sword, and let me tell you, they are going to be the backing track of the D&D campaign that I'm going to be running tonight. It is a sort of somewhere between like metal and electronic music that fits right in with video game style. I mean, they're called Magic Sword, you know? It's like sort of video gamey, very heavy, very intense. I've just started getting into it, so really enjoying it so far. So definitely recommend this band called Magic Sword. They're on Spotify.
Awesome. I have to check that out. So I'm going to cheat and do two, because there's two things that I definitely wanted to mention that I've just been so excited about. One is just that, listeners to this show who've been around for a while probably know that I'm a big fan of Steven Universe, the cartoon from Cartoon Network. And probably not for everybody, but I think it's just one of the best shows ever produced for children, and works great for adults too. It's a great adventure with some really fun characters, and the art's always been great, and I just really, really liked it a lot. And we've been frankly blessed by how Cartoon Network has let this show mature and given it time to sort of tell its story on its own terms. It's had 5 seasons. All 5 seasons were great. The final season, the season 5, which may not technically be the 5th season. Again, the show's not officially canceled, but they allowed the show to have what really felt like a true, not just season, but like true finale to the show, where it really wrapped up with a bow on it, and just like a really great emotional and plot climax. And then they came back with Steven Universe, the movie. And I was like, well, there was such a nice, tight little bow on the previous, like at the end of the season. Why are they doing this additional thing? And what it was like this really perfect sort of tribute to the show and the fans. It's so if you like Steven Universe, the new Steven Universe movie is so fantastic. It's it ages the characters up a few years, so it's sort of a where are they now for people kind of a couple of years after the end of the show.
He's got a neck.
He's got a neck now. It's true. So all the characters, you get a kind of a picture like Steven is now 16 instead of 14. And it's just not just that. It's also a great story, like great music. It's a full, not every episode of the show had songs, but this has a lot of songs. And I don't know, I was just felt so blessed that we got it, because like that show is so much more like of an emotional journey than most kids shows. And it's just amazing that we even got the kind of arcs that we got with it. I love that show. So anyway, sorry for gushing about that. If you don't like Steven Universe or you think I'm a big loser, that's fine too. And the other thing I was going to say is Control is really good. That game, I know if you listen to other game podcasts, a lot of them are probably already talking about Control. If you want a good description of it, maybe go listen to the Waypoints podcast from maybe a week ago. But I'm playing that now, and holy crap, that game is really good. If you like just every little corner of that game is full of like details that any one of them could be like a fun little weird short story or like a copy pasta or like creepy weird stuff. But it's also like a really good third-person shooter with fun powers to play with. Like I've not really played a lot of Remedy games in the past. I've never played Alan Wake, but now I kind of want to, because like these guys, this game rules. So I'm really, really into it. If you like third-person shooters with like lore that is interesting and just like super, super weird-looking environments that are like incredibly cool, go check out Control. It's awesome. Shane, what is making you happy this week?
What's making me happy this week? I kind of am going to have to go back by a week, but we didn't do what's making us happy on previous episodes, so I'm going to still count it.
Cool.
Raygan, you have been into tiki stuff.
Oh, yeah.
For a long time. And that's when you know someone who's into tiki stuff, it's great. They'll make you funny cocktails when you go to their house. You always know you can get them something as a gift because, there's a million weird cups with weird faces on them.
And I'm always excited to get them.
Yes. But oddly, you and I had never actually, I don't believe, been to a tiki bar.
Yeah, we'd been to Under the Volcano, which is not a very good. It's like not a tiki bar. It's got some like that place.
And I don't even
out of 10
remember. Yeah, I don't even think we. It's been years since you and I had even been to that place, and that's not a real tiki bar, so I'm not going to count that. Yeah. But we did when you came through town, we went to Lei Low,
Yeah.
a Houston tiki bar, and I'm starting to get why you dig tiki bars. So this place, how would you describe Lei Low?
Well, I mean, it's a classic tiki bar, but I guess what you'd say is like it's a relatively small strip mall location. From the outside, it looks pretty plain, but you go inside and it's a, dimly and warmly lit room full of like Polynesian pop ephemera and accoutrement. Like just every inch of every wall is covered with albums and signs and old menus and weird taxidermied puffer fish and all sorts of nautical themed and tiki themed stuff. And they had a nice bar you could sit at with a knowledgeable staff who were pouring the classics and had a couple of twists up their sleeve too.
Yeah, and the place, the vibe is perfectly on point. It's exactly what you'd want and expect from a tiki bar. The bar is all made out of rattan and has the look of a beach A-frame, and there's tiki guys everywhere. And like you said, the staff was really good. Like I got a chance to figure out what kind of tiki drinks would be the ones I would order. And I can't wait until you have moved down here to Houston and we can go back again, because I think we're going to want to put on our Aloha shirts and show up there every now and then.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's the thing that I'm most excited about. Lei Low has a deal where if you come in a Aloha shirt, you get the happy hour prices all the time. And I'm like, well, duh. I'm going to do that every time.
When we finally launch ShortCon and it's in Houston, we're all wearing Aloha shirts and going to this place.
Oh yeah, this place rules.
Yeah, get to Houston and bring your worst shirt.
Yeah. So though, Shane, that's a great one. That also made me very happy last week. I love getting to go to a new tiki bar I've never been to. And then I like to go back again and again and see what they do well. Like one of the nice things about tiki places is that the cocktails are complicated enough that there's a lot of variation between different places that mix them, but there are certain standbys where you can have the same thing in a bunch of different places and kind of say like, this place does a good Mai Tai, or this place doesn't do a good Mai Tai, but they do a damn good zombie, that kind of thing. So I love that about it. All right, and listeners, thank you so much for listening to The Short Game. This show is supported by listeners like you on Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month, which honestly makes a big difference to us. This is a small show, and even small amounts in the Patreon really excite us and help us grow the kinds of games that we're able to cover. It really helps. And if you have $1 a month to spare, we would love to see you on our Patreon, and even more, we'd love to see you in our Discord. Patrons at any level, $1 a month or more, and we certainly don't want to tell you to only do $1 a month, but all of our patrons get access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the games that we're playing, plan episodes for the show, and we chat about games after the shows have completed. So if you have something you want to say about Creature in the Well, maybe you need some tips, or maybe you just want to tell us how much you hate this game because it's too hard and unfair, then we're going to have a channel where you can do that. Join us on the Discord. It's a great place. We hang out there and chat pretty much all the time. You can also find our show on the web at www.theshortgame.net. You'll find a contact form there where you can let us know what you think and what you think we should try and play. And you can also find us on Twitter @_shortgame. You can also find me on Twitter @Raygan K. That's RAYGANK. Nate, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @NateSTL. I also wanted to throw out too, on the Discord, we have a couple other channels of games that we played in the past that we're still keeping the conversation going, or even games that we're not even going to cover that we're keeping the conversation going. So if you listen to our Slay the Spire episode and you've been playing that, hop into the channel, because there's some of us still playing that game. And there's a fourth character coming out at some point in the near future, and we've been talking about that. Really exciting stuff. So get in there.
Get in there. And Shane, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter @8bitshane.
And listeners, thank you once again so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.